Well, let's give Eric and Lenny another hand. I always like it when you two sing here. So now I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing our guest speaker. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our friend, Charly Heavenrich. Charly, otherwise known as the Canyon Guy, is a Grand Canyon guide and has gone on over 100 trips, rafting, hiking, and leading others through the Grand Canyon. His last trip was this May, and I'll share with you in a moment why that's spectacular. Some of you have heard this. Charly is also a photographer, a life coach, and has written 2 books and produced 1 DVD. And he will be available after the service to answer any questions that you might have and also to share those items with you. In the spring of 2013, as Charly was returning to the U.S. from a trip to England, he began to see double and lose his balance. His housemate picked him up at the airport that evening, and by 2:30 a.m., he was in surgery for a brain abscess. His life hung in a delicate balance for weeks, and he required a second brain surgery. Charly has been making a sure and remarkable recovery, and he continues to heal. In fact, this is his first speaking engagement since that time. Having been on 2 Grand Canyon trips with Charly as my guide, and having worked with Charly as my coach for a couple of years, I've learned a lot from Charly. There's a lot in that heart of his, and there's a lot of wisdom that he has to share. So these experiences continue to provide a metaphor for my life daily. This morning, Charly is sharing the Native American teaching of the wheel. His stories are set in the Grand Canyon, but not necessarily about the canyon. His presentation is intended to inspire you to find freedom in your own right. So I invite you to open your minds and your hearts to this incredible being as you walk the wheel and you enrich your life. So please help me warmly welcome Charly Heavenrich.
How do you like it so far? Well, I first met the Grand Canyon in 1978, May, and it was a homecoming, literally. As soon as the raft that I was in reached the current moving downstream, I had goosebumps. Tears formed in my eyes, and I had a very clear sensation of arms wrapping around me as if to say, "Welcome home, brother. Welcome home." That was my introduction. In 2013, after my 117th trip, I took a vacation, which is odd because my job as a raft guide in the canyon is like a vacation. It was 3 weeks in England visiting friends, as Cindy said. On my last full day there, I started seeing double. I thought it would go away, and I didn't want to upset my friends, so I said nothing. On the way to Heathrow on the train, it got worse. And by the time I arrived home in Boulder, I not only was seeing double, but I had no balance at all. The initial assessment was that I had a brain tumor, which meant death to me. They said, "Come back in a week." So I want to introduce you to a symbol that was essential for me and may prove useful for you. I'm calling the symbol that was it was a symbol of freedom. It looks like a circle, but I prefer to call it a wheel. It's the symbol of freedom because anytime you choose, you can walk around the wheel and find a fresh perspective, a new point of view. That assessment led to my first walk around the wheel. Notice the word chose, not to focus on the tumor, and instead decided to await the results of the lab. I found a different perspective, a different point of view. I didn't jump to a conclusion like the doctor did. Otherwise, I would have spent the entire time worrying about the tumor and its consequences. And it's a good thing I did because the doctor's point of view was wrong. It wasn't a tumor. That's the good news. The bad news, it was an infection deep in the brain, my brain. Now I had to find a different point of view, one that recognized the validity of the diagnosis but didn't assume a death sentence. The next step was an operation and to remove as much of the infected tissue as possible. I chose to allow the doctors to do their work. After all, I was going to be unconscious. And after I woke up, I would, while doing the hard work of maintaining a positive attitude, and do whatever it takes to regain my strength and balance. But life is not always pleasant. But if you're looking for certainty and comfort, stay close to home and hold on to your point of view. The consequence could be making choices based on too little or too much information, and living from one place on the wheel and resisting change. By being willing to walk around the wheel, you can expand into life's unlimited possibilities. It's not about one way being better than the other, but it is about embracing the adventure before us with passion and aliveness, and taking responsibility for our perceptions, our choices, and the results. We have been endowed by our Creator with free will to interpret our circumstances in an infinite number of ways. This includes the choices we make and the outcomes we get. This is an awesome power, and at times a heavy burden, because in the end, we realize we are responsible for the quality of our lives. In 2018, in 118 trips, we haven't gotten to 2018 yet. In 118 trips through the Grand Canyon, I came close to death several times. While I lived to tell the tales, nothing has come close to the gratitude I feel when I stand here and speak to you after what I have gone through as a result of my brain infection. I attribute much of that to my attitude, and saw many examples from my passengers. Each person went where they never thought possible when they walked around the wheel. Carol and Marilyn were two 60-ish friends who had come together on a trip. Marilyn had come to celebrate her 30th anniversary. And since her husband felt like a week in the Holiday Inn was too rugged, she brought her best friend. Carol was a tall, curvy woman who didn't seem particularly comfortable in her body. At Deer Creek, mile 36, there is a hike into an area called the patio. Situated behind a waterfall and down a narrow canyon, it's an oasis from the desert heat. At first, Carol resisted my invitation to join Marilyn and the rest of who had already made the hike. The thought of a 400-foot elevation change seemed daunting. I gently encouraged her to give it a try. The trail rose at a steep angle, cut into orange-pink Zoroaster granite by millions of 2- and 4-footed animals and humans. I can't do this, Carol insisted after taking only a few steps. I could see her carotid artery pumping. I admit that I felt impatient, but then I reminded myself to walk in her shoes. I knew what Carol could do more than she thought. Yes, you can, I said softly. Let's just take one step at a time. She tightened her jaw muscles and trusted me. And with each step, the past receded and the future beckoned. Soon, we were looking down on swirls of sediment in the milky green river. I gave Carol a boost up a steep sandstone wall shaded by a grove of overhanging acacias. We emerged into the sun and proceeded along a narrow trail, up a steep rock fall, and arrived at the top. Carol's worry lines were replaced by a satisfied smile. Just as we reached the rest of the group, who were relaxing at the patio, Carol looked at me and said, "It was worth it." Marilyn was delighted to see her friend and rushed to give her an exuberant hug. The patio at Deer Creek is a timeless place. The air is cool and charged with negative ions from rushing water. If you close your eyes, it can be taken to unimagined places. Large blocks of bright angel shale lay in various stages of erosion. Steep, narrow walls provided cooling refuge from the desert heat. Young cottonwoods sprout from the trunks of fallen ancestors. The creek sings softly as it nurtures wild watercress and wilding people. There is no time. Deepening shadows finally call for movement. As everyone prepares for the hike, Carol approached me and confided that Marilyn was afraid of heights. She asked if I would help her friend in the narrow spots of the descent. In 1976, on my first river trip ever, in Cataract Canyon, my best friend, who was a guide, and his crewmate were accomplished boulder hoppers. On our first hike together, they told me that if I wanted to go, with them, I had to keep up. There were no assurances that it might spare this flatlander's terror. I had to learn to trust my body and negotiate the challenge courses. And so I became very empathic to the fears and concerns of others who found themselves in similar circumstances. I offered the support to Marilyn on the return hike. She was relieved and grateful. She confessed that she had barely made it past the narrows coming in. I made 2 suggestions. First, with each step, she should feel her feet, the bottom of her feet, massaging the skin of the earth. This way, she would feel more connected to her body and to solid ground. And second, if she became fearful, she should concentrate on her breath. When we get into fear, we get out of our bodies, and we get into our heads. We stop breathing. By taking the time to breathe, we bring our attention back into our body, which makes it more likely that we can proceed and less likely that we'll have an accident. As we continued down the trail, Marilyn confessed another of her fears. She was a poet searching for her voice and hoped to find it on the river. At the end of the trip, she would be giving her first public reading. She admitted to a fear of being rejected, concerned that her poetry would be considered inadequate. In other words, she was afraid of the exposure. The trail narrowed and the walls closed in. Rushing water echoed 100 feet below. Marilyn flattened against the coarse sandstone as her heels hung over the edge. "Breathe," she said urgently, straining to regain control and get back into her body. I wanted to extend a hand, but we had agreed that if she wanted help, she would ask. I believed this was a choice point for Marilyn's life, an opportunity to overcome the kind of physical obstacle from which she had always shied away. The exposure, if you will. This time she had no choice. The rafts were down below, and the only way out was through. After taking several deep breaths, she took a tentative step to the left, which only served to validate her fear. "Breathe, Marilyn, breathe. Feel your connection with the earth. Take one more step," I said. "That's it. Just a couple more and you're there." I wondered if she could understand the breakthrough opportunity this experience offered. I knew if she took advantage of it, it could change her life in many ways. Another step. This one appeared easier. Then another. A couple more just to be sure. The trail widened and the chasm receded to a more comfortable distance. Marilyn's shoulders relaxed. Her white knuckles disappeared. She sighed, and her face softened. A tear ran down her cheek. She later told me my words had been all but drowned out by the sound of rushing water and her pounding heart. Emerging from the shaded side canyon and rounding a bend in the trail, Carol took a moment to look over the edge. And our 18-foot raft seemed like child's toys, she told Marilyn. She smiled and said she would take her word for it. Marilyn grew tentative. Another challenge loomed ahead. Below her was an improved trail of boulders, steep and strewn with contorted rocks. Her body tensed up. I imagined she was thinking, not again. 400 feet below, the sediment-laden river flowed downstream. I talked about the lesson of the bighorn. They always managed to find unseen toeholds while moving from one stable platform to the next. Momentum. That's the lesson of the bighorn. Start on a stable platform and keep going until you come to another stable place. As I said this, I demonstrated, stepping confidently from one rock to the next, stopping when I reached a flat surface. Tentatively, Marilyn bent her knees. As she reached down with her left hand in search of security, I felt a bit perturbed. Controlling my impatience, I said, "Marilyn, you are strong enough, and you have enough balance to do this." She looked at me with an expression of surprise. No one has ever told me I was strong enough, she said, tears forming. I felt my eyes moisten as emotion rose in my heart and my throat. After a moment, she straightened up and stepped down. Soon, she was walking with more confidence. Something had shifted. A smile appeared. I couldn't wait to reward her courage with a rainbow in the pool below. The date was September 11th, 2001. We all need support, whether it's in our personal or professional lives. There are no guarantees. Don't try to do it alone. John couldn't do it alone and learned a valuable lesson as a result. At mile 77, Ants Rapid is the first of 6 major rapids in the Grand Canyon. You know you're coming up to a major rapid because you can hear it before you can see it. and the sound is a threatening growl, unlike any other on the river. John was on a research trip in 1982 with several well-known scientists, but he was still a grad student in geology. He had never been west of the Alleghenies, yet here he was in the most amazing geologic museum in the world, enfolded in layers he had only seen in books. He was looking at rocks 1.8 billion years old, and this is how he looked much of the time. John was in heaven until we arrived at Hance Rapid, that is. We pulled over above the rapid and tied up our rafts and climbed to a boulder-encrusted sand dune. We had to scout the rapid to determine the safest path. John followed but turned back as soon as he saw the rapid. You see, I knew how he felt. I had been there. It was 1979, my first time rowing my own raft, and I made the mistake of being too far right on my entry. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. I went into a big pour-over and broke my left oar. To make matters worse, the oar slipped into the river. And as I reached for the oar, I fell into the river. So there I was at the head of the biggest rapid I had ever seen, in the water, heading downstream. I don't to this day know how I survived that rapid, but it taught me to pay attention and to respect the power of the river. It also showed me that even in the worst situation, I was probably going to be okay. On the way back to the boats, we found John sitting on a boulder. He was pale. Pale is not normal in the desert. John was scared. He was convinced he was going to die. I knew I had to find a way to shift his fear. I needed to give him, John, that is, some of my confidence. John, you're a scientist. You're good at detail, right? Yeah, I guess so, he replied. How would you like to help me get through this rapid safely? Well, yes, but how? Well, this is the most technical rapid in the canyon with lots of markers. If you learn the run, you can help us get through safely. He looked skeptical, but he was willing to try. He was totally focused as he listened to my description. We would row across the river, have the back left towards the shore at the left, break through the lateral, and ideally go to the left of what we call the goalposts. But if we couldn't make it in between the two, we would go in between them. And then we had to find the Whale Rock, which is a big pour-over, which was named for a guide who was stuck there for a whole day. If we couldn't get to the left of the rock, then we had to go right and hit some big waves straight. So John was very intent, he said, tell me again. So I did again. We go here, and then here, or here, and then ideally here. No, you're not supposed to be there. But if we can't get left of that, then we have to go right and hit some big waves straight. So, where am I? He was totally focused on my description. If we weren't far enough left, we could run between the rocks. So John said, finally, I did, and okay, let's go, he finally said. By the time we arrived back at the raft, John's color had returned. As we shoved off, he was completely focused. The current upstream of a major rapid is agonizingly slow. And then all hell breaks loose. Several times John asked if we were on track. Then as we entered, John started shouting directions. That's great, Charlie, you're right on target. Break through that lateral, grab that slack water. Wow, look at the size of that. You'll never make it to the left of that, the left goalpost. See if you can split them. Now we have to get left. Where's the wheel rock? There. No, we aren't going to get left. Got to find that slot. We have to find that. We have to get right. Oh my God, I'm glad I'm not going in there. Straighten out, Charlie. Those are monsters. Great run. John was so excited, I had to tell him to pay attention because we still had more rapids to run. Two key things happened to help John in his shift. These are keys to changing anyone's attitude, be it at work or in their personal life. First, John received information he lacked. He didn't know how to read the river and was convinced there was no safe way through. When he learned the run, he realized it was possible to make it through without dying. Second, John was invited to get involved. Instead of being a passive spectator hoping for a safe outcome, John became a participant. And if you have the information you need to make an informed choice and you are contributing to the success of any project, you're more likely to be enthusiastic about participating and more confident in the outcome. Something else happened to take John's mind off his fear. Dr. Wayne Dyer defines fear as an emotion that immobilizes you in the present for something that may or may not happen in the future. Did you know you can't experience fear in this moment? No fear in this moment? That's crazy. I've experienced fear and it was very much in the moment, you may be thinking. Well, I realize it felt that way, but think about it. Fear is about a future event. Something that might happen, be it in the next instant or some undetermined future. John was afraid of what he thought would happen. And yet, when he was in the middle of all that chaos where the danger really is, he was totally in the moment, totally involved. He'd forgotten about his fear. The Grand Canyon experience offers many lessons that you can use in your day-to-day lives. Among them are three of the most valuable. Well, that is that comes from Brooke Medicine Eagle, who was a Stanford-educated medicine woman. And she said, in this country, there are lots of ways that we say yes and lots of ways that we say no. And we say yes by saying, well, I suppose so, or I guess I should, or I'll try. And in fact, those are all no's. So she said, in order to, if you are not certain of the outcome, it's a no. And I've made it a little bit shorter. If you can't say yeah, hell yes, say no. So, now let's get on to these three things. So support is crucial. Remember, you've got to do it yourself, but you don't have to do it alone, and you often can't do it alone. And fear is never in the moment. It's not about eliminating the fear, because we all have it. But when you are willing to operate in the presence of fear, you will diminish the control that fear has over you. So stay in the moment whenever possible, and bring yourself back when you lose it. And attitude determines outcome. And it's the only thing we have any real control over, your attitude. If you want to go where you've never been before, you have to go where you've never been before. So, it's really important. It's really amazing what can happen when you stop waiting and start taking personal responsibility. A friend of mine loves to say, you don't have to be good to start. You just have to start to be good. Oddly enough, even some of your friends may try to talk you out of your dreams. In the early 90s, Donna, a 61-year-old woman still suffering from the painful reminders of childhood polio, hiked down the 7.5 mile Bright Angel Trail with her 35-year-old fiancé. 61, 35-year-old fiancé. Prior to the trip, many of her well-intentioned friends managed to tell her all the things that go wrong on a trip in the Grand Canyon. She was going to be hot, cold, frightened, sunburned, seasick, and more, which only fed her anxiety. In spite of those comments and being too cold a couple of times in what she called the icy rapids, she was never sunburned or frightened. In fact, as the trip progressed, there was no doubt Donna was thoroughly enjoying herself. She never said much, but her ever-present smile was more than sufficient. On the 6th day of the trip, we had just finished lunch after running Lava Falls, the last major rapid in the Grand Canyon. The afternoon was peaceful, with no big water. As we flowed lazily along, a soft breeze blowing off the water, modifying the desert heat, Donna suddenly shifted positions on the raft. Plunking herself on the front tube facing downstream, she was in her own world, playfully kicking her feet in the water, humming quietly to herself. Finally, I asked, "What are you feeling right now, Donna?" She looked over her shoulder, a huge grin dominating her face. "Freedom, Charlie. Freedom. Until I came here, I didn't realize how much responsibility I had accepted for everybody else in my life but me." Donna began her trip feeling her limitations, burdened by negative comments of others. She ended it feeling free. Other people's opinions are never as important as your own. Freedom is the result of being responsible for yourself first, so you can be available to others when you choose. Who can relate to that? Isn't it time that you finally took responsibility for your life and started living your dreams? Regardless of the circumstances in your life, you have the power to walk around the wheel and choose freedom. Thank you.